Ultimately, because homeopathy is built on timeless principles and harnesses our body's own internal healing abilities, the range of things it can be helpful with is nearly endless. Over the centuries, homeopathy has been helpful in such wide-ranging things as acute infections, recovery from acute injuries, recovery from psychological traumas and surgeries, chronic infections, chronic diseases of all kinds, including autoimmune diseases, neurological conditions, gastrointestinal conditions, endocrine conditions, psychiatric conditions, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, allergies, childhood developmental issues, as well as just keeping people healthy and navigating the stressors of everyday life. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Dr. Andrew Chambers. This is my final video in my Homeopathy 101 education series. We've covered a lot of ground in this series so far, so the main point of today's video will be to recap some of the high points from the previous ones in the series and to more fully answer the question I'm sure a lot of you guys have, which is, can homeopathy actually help me? So first, I want to dispel some of the major myths and misconceptions that I see out there regarding homeopathy. I covered this in even more detail in my previous video on the subject, so refer back to that one if you want more details. So myth number one, that homeopathy is some kind of new age alternative medical theory, or just recently developed, or that it's a passing phase or trend. Myth number two, that homeopathy is fringe or unpopular. Myth number three, that any kind of natural or alternative healing approach out there qualifies as being homeopathy. Myth number four, that it is totally impossible that homeopathy works, which is what I call the implausible mechanism of action argument. And the corollary of this, which is that, well, any benefit we might see from homeopathy, it's gotta just be placebo, right? Because it's not possible that it works in the first place. And myth number five, that homeopathy is unscientific. So with these myths in mind, what I believe homeopathy is, based on my own knowledge, experience, and education, is the following. A well-established medical paradigm with a very deep and rich tradition of usage spanning over 2 centuries and all 6 populated continents, which is internationally used amongst medical doctors, non-physician professionals, and lay people alike. It's a unique, comprehensive healing system with its own methodical approach to utilizing medicinal substances to stimulate the body's own healing abilities in a way that is different than any other kind of healing approach out there, which, although imperfectly understood as to its exact mechanism of action, causes empirically demonstrated influences on cells and living organisms, including plants, animals, and humans, with clinical benefits which go beyond what a mere placebo would be expected to accomplish, and is a healing method discovered by applying the scientific method and which uses the scientific method at every step of its application. And for people who want to follow up the trail on some of these claims, I've put links to relevant articles in the description of the video down below. So these are some pretty big claims, but to more concretely answer the question, can homeopathy actually help me? Let's dive into some of how it works and what sets it apart. So the way I explain it to people is that when the body is sick, it brings together all of its different systems in unity in the attempt to restore health. And this process in physiology is known as restoring homeostasis. This systemic response of the body to restoring health is known as the healing response. Now, most of the time, for most of us, this healing response is fully successful. However, if it is not successful and the body is not able to restore health, we have the development of a chronic disease and the symptoms become more or less permanent. Now, conventional medications tend to work by targeting very specific enzymes or biochemical pathways or hormones or receptors or microbes, and really hoping that this kind of tinkering will result in a systemic and holistic benefit in health and well-being. However, homeopathic remedies work on the underlying regulatory mechanisms as a whole, which are what are primarily responsible for the healing response being successful and ultimately for healing to occur. Another way of saying this is that the right homeopathic remedy works by stimulating and reactivating the healing response within our body, helping it to complete its task, which it's been unable to do so far. This healing response is ultimately what's responsible for improvements in our symptoms and well-being. Also, because the homeopathic remedy works on the underlying regulatory systems within our body as a whole, We don't need to take a different pill or a different supplement for every single different symptom we're coming in with. So as an example, if a person comes in and say they have bothersome GERD, so heartburn, and bothersome constipation and anxiety, rather than them getting a few pills or supplements for the GERD and a few more supplements for the anxiety and a few more for the constipation, we would give a single homeopathic remedy with the goal of helping all three of those most bothersome symptoms at the same time. The reason this works is because homeopathy works on the body as a whole and not just on isolated parts of it. Now, this is all well and good, but how do we actually find the right remedy for somebody? So homeopathy is first and foremost an extremely individualized form of care. There are literally hundreds and thousands of different remedies out there, and it's my job as a homeopathic practitioner to find the single remedy that best fits my client's case and will ultimately stimulate this healing response. Now, to do this, we can't go just based off the name of the disease diagnosis they come in with. And why is this? Well, ultimately it's because the disease diagnosis itself is not specific enough to guide me to the right remedy. So as an example, say we have 10 people coming in the door with the exact same disease diagnosis. That may be IBS, maybe rheumatoid arthritis, anxiety, allergies, etc. Now, even though there will be very strong similarities amongst those people with the same diagnosis, which of course is how they got the same diagnosis in the first place, what happens is if we ask enough questions about their individual experience of those symptoms, we will ultimately find that each person experiences that sickness in their own unique way. And ultimately, this will lead us to giving a different homeopathic remedy for each of those unique presentations. Some people's symptoms may be very strongly aggravated by being cold or in very cold weather, whereas for another person, they may get a lot worse if they're in too hot of weather or if they get overheated. One person's sickness might have started with an emotional trauma, and it may have a kind of emotional triggers in the present that make the symptoms worse. And another person's may have no relation to anything emotional or psychological at all. And sometimes there's symptoms that started at the same time as the disease diagnosis that are not related to the disease per se, that will be different from person to person, and these differences will also guide our choice of the remedy. In the case of somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, perhaps they developed really severe constipation and bloating at the same time as the RA started. This would be helpful as a remedy in their case. Whereas another person, no abdominal symptoms started at the same time. It's all about taking a whole person approach and individualizing the recommendation based on the person in front of us, rather than trying to rely on a one-size-fits-all protocol. And this applies equally well to people who come in and are clearly suffering with intense symptoms, but yet do not have a conventional disease diagnosis name per se. The same process of individualization is taken for every person who comes in the door. And ultimately, a person doesn't need a conventional disease diagnosis in order for us to recommend a good homeopathic remedy for them or to benefit from the right one. So when we get the right remedy for a person and trigger this healing response, we can see some pretty amazing things. In video 5 of this series, The Healing Response, I walk through 4 real-life examples from my own experience to demonstrate what kinds of positive effects we can see when someone is on the right remedy. The examples I gave in that video were people struggling with gastrointestinal issues, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, and hormonal imbalances. Check that video out if you want more details of their case and their experiences. But the big picture takeaway is the following. First, despite the diversity of health issues they were dealing with, the right homeopathic remedy was able to restore health. Second, the improvements did not take months and months to manifest, but were clearly evident within the first 4 weeks on the right remedy. Now, it doesn't mean that in 4 weeks we should expect the chronic symptoms to be fully gone, but within the first 4 weeks on the right remedy, a person should definitely be feeling better subjectively and start having improvements in their symptoms in order for us to know we're on the right track. Third, the homeopathic remedy was able to restore health without causing extra health complications and side effects along the way. And in some cases, it actually helped symptoms improve that I wasn't even aware of when we recommended the remedy in the first place. And fourth, in addition to helping their symptoms get better, all 4 of these people reported feeling significantly better subjectively and as a whole person than they had felt in years. And this is something really common in people I see who get on the right homeopathic remedy, where they'll say something to me like, I can't put my finger on it, but I just feel better. I just feel more like myself. And these are always great signs that a person is on the right remedy and we're really triggering that healing response. However, triggering the healing response is really just the first step in the healing journey as a whole. The ultimate long-term goal of homeopathic care is to stimulate the body's own healing abilities such that there are no more bothersome chronic symptoms, and to help the person achieve a more energetic, robust, and resilient state of vitality that is also not overly susceptible to environmental triggers causing illness like it might have been before. While this is occurring, the right remedy should help bring about a state of mental and emotional health and balance, which ultimately enables a person to pursue and achieve whatever important goals they have in their life. And ultimately, we should be able to do all of this without having to add on more and more supplements and medications year after year. However, it would be dishonest of me if I stood here and told you guys that this was always a smooth or an easy process. So it's important to know that the road back to health is not always smooth or easy, and that rough patches and roadblocks are sometimes an inevitable part of the journey. Now, for some people, this may happen right at the beginning, because as homeopaths, sometimes we really hit the bullseye with the remedy on the very first try, and the person is kind of off to the races. And other times it takes us a few attempts at different remedies before we finally dial in on that remedy that will help stimulate the healing response in a person. And while the client or patient is waiting for those first few attempts to finally get on the right remedy, it can require a lot of patience sometimes. And sometimes those rough patches happen more in the middle of the healing journey, and this is quite common. So the most common example here is a person where they've been on the right remedy, they've been experiencing improvements in their symptoms month after month, and all of a sudden the improvements seem to stall, or they actually may get a little worse than they were at their best. Now, as kind of bothersome and surprising as this can be for some clients, as a homeopath, this is actually a very normal part of the healing journey. What this means is that the body is no longer reacting to the stimulus of the homeopathic remedy. Most of the time, what needs to happen is the person needs a new potency of the same remedy in order to re-stimulate the healing response to continue to occur. If this doesn't work, what it then means is the person actually requires a different homeopathic remedy altogether for their new state of health that will further deepen the healing process. Most everyone dealing with a chronic disease will require multiple potencies of the same remedy, and most people will require several different homeopathic remedies over the course of their healing as a whole. And understanding this, you can see why consistent follow-ups with the homeopath are so important, because it's these follow-ups that enable us to individualize the recommendations based on your current situation. And even though there may be potholes and roadblocks at times, as long as we're making the right adjustments at the right time, we know that the person is still healing and we are moving closer to those goals of long-term homeopathic care. So, can homeopathy help me? I hope this video and this series as a whole has answered this question for you. Ultimately, because homeopathy is built on timeless principles and harnesses our body's own internal healing abilities, the range of things it can be helpful with is nearly endless. Over the centuries, homeopathy has been helpful in such wide-ranging things as acute infections, recovery from acute injuries, recovery from psychological traumas and surgeries, chronic infections, chronic diseases of all kinds, including autoimmune diseases, neurological conditions, gastrointestinal conditions, endocrine conditions, psychiatric conditions, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, allergies, childhood developmental issues, as well as just keeping people healthy and navigating the stressors of everyday life. If you're ready to experience the power of homeopathy for yourself or your family, visit us at wholefamilyhomeopathy.com, send us a message, and see if it's right for you. So I hope you found this video and this series as a whole helpful. If you know anyone you think would benefit from this knowledge, please feel free to pass this playlist along to them. Until next time, take care, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.